Okay, so welcome back. This is the intake interview practicum. I want to introduce our speaker who's going to talk about how to do an intake interview. This is the Virtual Residency Workshop 2026. It's Wednesday, June 24th. This is the second session of the day. I want to introduce our speaker, Eric Marshall from Rutgers University. Eric, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on board and to your folly. Ha ha ha. So who am I? I work in the Office for Advanced Research Computing at Rutgers, and we're centralized compute doing HPC and all that kind of stuff that you folks are all lined up to do. I've been doing this since they invented Dirt, which is technically in the 90s as far as I'm concerned. Um, and I wanted to start off with a, a little story to illustrate kind of some of the things we're going to talk about today. So when I was in my first job at a rather large financial institution writing very beautiful reports, I was given all the weird stuff because I knew a lot of different programming languages. So if there was something old or something weird, they'd throw it to me. And there's this one report that was very important to somebody very high in the management chain that would print out at 5 a.m. every day. And this person would get up at 5 a.m. to go get this printout and read it and then do whatever they needed to do. And if that printout didn't show up, they'd get very grumpy and they'd go up their food chain to the very top of the organization and come back down the IT food chain, and there'd be lots of yelling and whatever. So at some point, this was assigned to me. Why does this printout not happen at 5 a.m.? And so it was an obscure language. I spent a little time trying to debug it. It looked good. Then I spent some time looking at the server. It looked good. And then I tried to find the server in the machine room to see if there's something funky about the networking, and I couldn't find it. So, very long story made short, eventually it turned out that this bit of code was everything was fine. The server was fine. It was not where it was supposed to be. It was not, in fact, in a production environment. It was in a DBA's office. It was on a test box. And that machine that was the test box had a really crappy fan and occasionally get really loud. And so occasionally DBA would get a note of that and just flip off the server until it cooled down and then you turn it back on. And that's what caused the outages. So you can be as technically savvy as you want, but if you can't get the information from your users, you're going to bark up the wrong trees. And so without having found that DBA, gained his trust to kind of discuss what was going on, I would not have been able to figure out how to move this to the right part of the world and have it make its pretty reports and everyone else could just stop worrying about it. So most of what we're going to talk about is going to fall into two domains. One is what over a longer period of time you need to stuff in your head to make the intake interview process more fluid, easier to work with, more profitable for you and for your user. And the other part is what actually goes into that interview. So I also want to mention very briefly to apologize about the slides. I used an old format and was told to use a new format and did not do that correctly. So have some mirth at me missing some of the stuff that should have been changed. So the usual stuff, the common wisdom you're going to hear from everybody. And when you talk about this, is that you need to build a relationship with the person who's coming to you for advice, help, ingress, whatever it is that your organization and you present to that person. You have to understand what that user's goals, needs, etc., all that kind of stuff. Um, this is a relationship where different sides have different information, different vocabulary, different ways of operating, but you've already been through this, A, probably in your day job, and B, as someone who has done this in the real world over and over again. Your doctors, your car mechanics, the plumber have exactly this kind of imbalance where you have a problem. You probably do not have the technical knowledge to explain to a doctor in the same vocabulary they would use to describe the problem, but you have to give enough information to that doctor to get a technical for them to get a technical read on it and have some path forward. So you've been on the other side of this equation many times, and you should leverage that as much as you can. Uh, the more you understand about what they're doing, the more you understand about your own environment, your own organization, that kind of stuff, the more you'll have intuitions about where things can go wrong, where people usually get snagged, and that kind of thing. So the more you can invest in that, the better. Um,
Eric,
obviously,
sorry to interrupt. Do you have
yeah.
slides you wanted to share?
Oh, I thought I was sharing them. Okay. Uh, Thank you for that stupidity. All right. All right. Not quite the view I was hoping for. All right, I'm gonna go with this for the moment. All right. So, so as I mentioned before, also on that list of things, again, this is a very small list of the usual stuff. Uh, Researcher timelines. Anything can be damaged in terms of pressure by a lack of money and a lack of time. So understanding those two variables will also make it easier to come up with a landscape that you can navigate cleanly. And one thing which is probably perhaps a hot take, I personally would advise not to come up with a solution on the spot. First thought is not necessarily always the best thought. Sometimes it's obvious, and yes, you should grab low-hanging fruit when you can, but try to get enough context, enough moving parts so that you can navigate to. Uh, you don't want to be too prescriptive too early in the process, is all I'm saying there. So let's break this into those two parts. What about yourself? So why are we doing this? Who cares? Why would you spend time on this? I think it's important to think that part of the process that you're going through is that you want this to be as efficient for yourself and for the researcher as possible. In an ideal world, they wouldn't have to deal with you. In an ideal world, you wouldn't have to deal with them. It'd be all self-service and they'd get their stuff done and voila, everyone would be happy. However, the world being as it is, you need to be able to get them where they need to go as quickly and as cleanly and as accurately as possible. And so this process we're going to discuss is part of that toolkit to make that happen cleanly, correctly, quickly. So, yeah, they want to get science done. You want them to get science done, and you want to be the smallest speed bump as possible on that path. Why is that difficult? Uh, Mainly because you speak different languages. And while you may not realize it when you're talking to your doctor or to your car mechanic, when you go, well, when I do this with the turn the wheel left, it goes come, come, come. The mechanic is translating that into something more technical about the suspension and the front wheel alignment, whatever, that you don't know or care about really. So you have to be the bridge to the other side of the equation to that researcher. And so the more facility you have in translating to bridging that gap, the more valuable you become to that researcher. Um, and since time is not infinite, your money is not infinite. Quicker and faster you can do that, uh, the better. So that's part of what makes this difficult is that the those constraints may not give you the luxury of being able to move through all the moving parts. And there's just a lot of stuff that you usually have to get through. So they may be able to think, oh, it's just a script I run, but they may not understand it's inside a container. They may not understand the language it uses. They may not understand the supplementary chunks or modules that are pulled in to make that happen. They may not understand the networking that gets their data in or out, or all that stuff that needs to be transplanted into the new system. So that complexity is why this is difficult, I think. Just like if someone asks you, how do I get to Cincinnati? Your first step isn't to say, well, you stand up out of your chair and then you turn to the door. We often miss things that are at a resolution that may not be important to us when transmitting that information, but is critical perhaps to somebody else. So it's another cognitive bias that we have. So working on you as part of the interview process. Your starting point. They don't know you, you don't know them, you don't know their research. As I mentioned before, first solution is not the best solution. They're going to come to you because they have a problem. They have something they want to solve. It may be not a, the problem may be just being new to the environment, or they may have a real technical snag or they can't scale. So you're going to do the usual things that you already can do, you've been doing since you were 5 years old. You're going to, ask those questions that are very clear. And in your inner voice that sounds just like Henry, you're going to say, explain it to me like I'm 12, his quote. And you need to be able to explain your side of the world to them like they're 12, so that you can establish a common vocabulary. Jargon is great, but without everyone understanding the jargon, it is a barrier. So be very mindful of what vocabularies and what metaphors you use when describing these things. You already know if you don't know something. If someone explains something to you, you have that inborn detector to go, huh? So you're going to use that over and over again. You, by definition, if you're in this job position, are already a problem solver. So you're already going to try to soak up details, configurations, ideas, bits and pieces that are going to give you clues to how this could go wrong. You also know much about your world that perhaps the researcher doesn't. And particularly for new researchers coming to an organization, they may not know where research support ends and IT support for enterprise stuff starts, or what the networking in their part of the world looks like, or 1,000 other things that you have context which may be obvious to you, but not obvious to them. That recurring theme of what's obvious to one side and not the other is really what we're trying to bridge here over and over again. So how can you improve on this stuff? Well, when you don't know, ask questions. I think I duplicated my slide there. So I would advise to get better on this process that you need to build your own mental catalog of things that go awry. That is to say that if you help 10 researchers, you're going to see a pattern among those 10. If you do 100, even more so. And so sometimes that's technical things. Sometimes that's an approach to the technical work by that group or researcher that may lead them into areas that best practices try to avoid. To me, version control is usually one of those that, would probably be a good idea. Why did you guys skip that? You're not there to judge. You're not there to coach them on that kind of stuff, unless that's what they're asking about. But being mindful of how they got into a problem may help them dig themselves out, or pivot to a new world order that makes life easier for them. They may also and will have blind spots in terms of, like, maybe how the money flows, maybe how networking flows, maybe how security around personally identifiable information for health and that kind of thing. So those are things that also that you may have some information about, but you may need to hand off on. So you're going to be a bridge because you're going to speak both domains, but you're also going to be a bridge in another sense that you're going to attach them to resources that can help them do things that you can't do, but you know they need. So trying to have your cadence of questions and your thinking match theirs also helps. If there's multiple people, get the big picture stuff from the big picture people and get the details from the detail people, and that'll give you a more complete view. Sometimes switching that up also is useful because seeing where that ends and where that begins also gives you a sense of how they might misstep or what has gone wrong or what they need some help with. The more you can understand about the world you work in and how that world works, the better you can be at problem solving more intangible problems, more subtle things that may not be the first pass tension or problem. So, my institution, we have approximately 600 zillion departments, and many of them have their own IT staff. And some of them are very, very talented, and some that's just one of the many hats they wear. They spend as much time on that as they do with hazardous materials and stuff. So knowing where those weaknesses are, leadership styles, some people are very top down and don't have a lot of leeway. Others are very permissive and don't understand necessarily what the technical sides are. So understanding that kind of organizational aspect will have a great deal of impact on how you help support somebody. blind spots are a great aspect of, I think, in terms of these ingest interviews, because sometimes the problems are there because the organization isn't as efficient as it could be. So in my world, for many years, still today, I'd say, network handoffs inside research buildings is always tricky. So that's one of the things that I know is going to cause someone heartache because they can't move data across the campus or to peers across the United States. So knowing that there's a blind spot and knowing it's going to come up, having having done some homework will help uh, prepare you for that kind of fun. Um, Most of the things we're talking about here are essentially complex adaptive systems, which means they grow in complexity and can be brittle. And so the more that you understand about that kind of thing, just as a system unto itself is useful, how people deal with analyzing failure. So there's a lot of beautiful stuff that comes from, sadly, airplane crashes and failures or other industrial disasters where folks analyze the nature of failure, and that's been pulled into a number of different IT organizations, and that can be used by us to try to figure out if something fails, how many things had to fail in a row for that to really become an actual disaster and that kind of stuff. So the more of those tools you have, the more resiliency you can build into a system that you're working with, and help that researcher not fall in those holes over and over again. Um, Again, I also put a subtle pitch in that blame is very different than error, and so we should be very mindful of that when trying to figure out how things aren't working. All right, what can you work on in a long, long time? Communication, which is what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But being that person who can bridge different groups, either in terms of vocabulary or technical skills or mathematics or whatever it is that you need to have to make that work, makes you very valuable. It may not be the most high paying position, but it will allow you to get places that other people can't and bring other teams or people to bear in places that it's not going to happen otherwise. So the communication, your ability to construct metaphors that make sense to everybody on the same page. If so, I find that personally very useful if you're talking to a chemist and you're talking to an IT person and they need to be on the same page. Building robust metaphors and then knowing where those metaphors fail is often a very useful and cheap technique. Being curious, I think, which we'll get to when we talk about communication, helps you stay present and build the information base that you need to be flexible and to plug into any sort of environment quickly. Um, and I say that not just in the moment that you're talking to, an anthropologist or archaeologist about the pollen they found and how they're going to analyze that, but also in the long range, the long term. The more you can read, the more you can find, the more you delve into, the more surface area, if you will, that you have to make contact and share information and understand what they're saying, which leads to read widely if you can. And it doesn't have to be reading. It can be videos or documentaries or whatever it is. But the more you can understand about the landscape that your researchers function in, uh, the better you'll be at least grasping some part of that. I've often asked them for folks that had long-term relationships, I've asked for reading. Sometimes that's been great. Sometimes I've gotten to page 12 and didn't have enough mathematics to continue, but again, it helped. The more you can learn about the infrastructure around the work they're doing, the better. So grant funding, how money flows through your institutions, cybersecurity, all that kind of stuff will make you a much more valuable participant and agent to help guide them through all the stuff they need to do. And again, this is just a massive wish list of what could be in your roadmap. Don't get overwhelmed. You have enough tools to start today with what you have. You've probably already been doing this for a bit. But my pitch here is to keep at it. Just nibble here and there. You get tired, take a break, but come back to it. This is, I think, a valuable set of things for just life, not just what we're doing here. Even more far-fetched things to work on to improve your set of skills that you bring to the table when you start that interview. Improv comedy, right? Working in the moment, reading the room, reading the people you're working with, and it's a lot of fun. So I suggest that. Public speaking, acting, choir, playing in a pub band, whatever it is, again, makes you more comfortable with yourself in front of an awkward audience. Like today, I wasn't expecting 70 folks or so. No, so it's the same as talking to three of you, I think. Expanding your knowledge of technical architectures. So if someone says, "Oh, we use Hadoop. It's all MapReduce, blah blah," blah. You have a greater chance of understanding what they're talking about. It doesn't take a great deal of technical knowledge to get the big picture on technical architectures. Stuff sort of like, "Oh, we need Redis for this, and I need a memory cache for that." At least you have a sense if they're talking technical of why they might be using some of that stuff. Again, take nibbles, don't drown in this stuff. Same with the domain of science. The more you can learn about even basic, biology, chemistry, whatever the domains you support are, it gives you a little more surface area to understand, and it gives them more surface area when they try to explain something in quote human language unquote to you. I would also, I didn't put it in here, but I'd say suggest that you should also practice troubleshooting. Probably get enough practice, but that is also a skill in terms of analyzing, compartmentalizing, and triage. So those are all things you can work on. I also suggest teaching. If you really want to know if you really wish to know if you know something, try to teach it to somebody else. It exercises the same skill set that we're working on here, with a slightly different focus. So I find that to be, again, a great test and a great way to prep for some of these things. All right, having said about all that, what about the damn interview, Eric? All right. Um, as I just mentioned, I think all these things can be learned. So what are you going to do in the actual interview? Just like you and your mechanic, when you're with your mechanic, you want to get the mechanic to understand your problem as clearly and quickly and cleanly as possible so they can work on the right thing. You don't want to come back in 2 days and go, "Oh, what do you mean you only changed the windshield wiper fluid? That's not what the problem with the steering was." So, you being on the other side of the equation for this, you want to establish a relationship as clean as you can. That makes your life easier. It makes the social interactions more graceful. It allows them to have a bit of trust in you, and that trust allows them to impart more information quicker and cleaner to you with less noise in this mixing with the signal. So to me, that's a really critical thing. Um, Sometimes humor helps that. Sometimes finding a common interest helps with that. Sometimes having some history definitely helps that. I will say there's like a trust battery that is set at medium when you first meet anybody, and that either goes up or down depending on what you do in that interaction. Your goal is to increase the amount of trust in that relationship. You want to come out of that meeting with some understanding of what their goals are in terms of the research, ideally, and more importantly, what the technical work that they need to have supported and how that works with the research. You want to come away with why they're talking to you, essentially. And that is because either a problem or they need something to start that they don't have currently. And you have to understand why they care and what they want you to do. And what they want you to do may not be what they need. That's another little distinction you're going to hold on to as you move forward. You need to understand their goals, mostly timelines, and if there's economic aspects, how that impacts you and them. You want to find out what the environment they currently are operating in. Is this just the one person on their laptop? Is they have a lab of 12 people and six of them are technicians? Um, are there other people with parts of this puzzle you should be chatting with, even if the researcher doesn't necessarily think that is uh, the most important part of this, but you want to find out who those folks are. In the bigger labs, I found there's usually a graduate student or so who's doing a bunch of the technical work as well as the research. And so sometimes that's the person to go to. Sometimes the researcher will tell you out of the gate, I need this, but you need to talk to Alice or Bob or whoever. When you come out of that process of the interview, you will have what the problem is. You'll probably have a couple ideas what might be pathways to investigate in terms of solutions. If you're lucky, you'll know what the solution is and you just make it happen. Um, you'll have a sense of their timeline. Um, and then you have your homework, as I put it. You need to come up with an action plan. You need to write up your notes, and you're going to take notes because that'll help you remember this stuff, even if you never look at the notes again. But you're going to write up your notes and send them to the researcher. or something similar to that, so that they can review that and go, oh, I forgot to talk about the Wuziwatsu. We need this as well. Um, so you're going to send that a summary. You're going to come up with a timeline. You're going to calendar that timeline so that you don't forget, they don't forget, and you know when your deadlines are coming up. That those three actions will make you look like you have your act together more than you perhaps do. It'll make it easier for them to keep track of what's going on. They have lots of other things they want to focus on, not necessarily folks like us. And you want to keep communications open. So if something changes, if there's a status, if nothing changes, but time has passed, you want to communicate with them and the folks that are part of that process. So that is what I would like to come out of one of these interview goals. And these are things that it's very easy to hit three of them and forget two of them or whatever. And so if you have a checklist, that'll make life a little bit easier for you, and it'll allow you to fill in gaps if you miss something. They're like, oh, I forgot to ask about those subnets, crap, that kind of thing. All right, so what can we do to make comms easier and better? The great, the easiest way to solicit information from others is to have them speak as much as possible. There's two pitfalls there. One, you don't want them to monologue along a tangent which you'd understand or is not germane to the problem. And you don't want to monologue to them, like the evil villains of Bond films or wherever. You don't want to get caught up on your vision of what a solution would be. You're there to hear and extract information from them. But what are some of the techniques you would go to do that? So to me, open-ended questions are your friend. I lift these questions from a previous presenter, and so thank you, Henry, for sharing previous slides. That made my life easier. Um, these can actually be even more open-ended, but you may want to drill in when you see a nugget going by that is of interest that you think which matches the tricky things or things where people stumble. So you want to grab that stuff as fast as you can. Um, Sometimes it's even wider open on this, and then you can drill in if you find something interesting. And then one of the things that I think is a skill to learn is to be able to drill in to deep focus and then pop back out to that larger context to keeping it open. The more open-ended the question is, the more the researcher will bring to bear what they think is going on. Now, sometimes you have to guide that process a little bit because they may be emotionally excited about something which is a little bit off target for what brought them to you. That happens, that's fine, but you need to be part of controlling that process to try to get the information you both need to have transmitted. Um, and that leads me to this: be in the moment, be there, listen. Your job is really to listen and extract information. So different styles work for different people. Some are more formal, some are more laid back, some have more humor. I love humor because that bends the metaphors, which allows you to find more information that way. And it keeps everyone loose and comfortable. But not everybody can do that. Active listening is your friend. I suggest that you encode this stuff. You take notes as they're chatting, because that'll help you remember salient things. And if you don't get all those details, if you go to those notes an hour or two later and look at them and annotate them, you'll be surprised how much information it brings up in your memory that you had kind of let slip. So note taking to me is a great force magnifier. I personally use an artist's sketchbook, which doesn't have any lines in it. So I can diagram and I can emphasize things. I can, just, it gives me a little latitude. It doesn't have to be your path. There's plenty of other things that work for lots of people. So you want to adapt to however they talk. You want to be an active listener. You want to be curious. This is actually a chance for you to learn about their part of the world, which is just a nice fringe benefit, I think. And sometimes you're dealing with people who've done crazy, amazing things, and that's kind of, it never hurts to let them know you think it's a crazy, amazing thing they're working on. Um, you foster dialogue, pause and reflect. And again, this is also a lift from a previous slide set. You want to reflect. You want them to know that you understand. Many people advise that you say back to them in your own words what it is they've said. I think that's completely valid, and I recommend that. But I also recommend asking a question that shows you understand what they've said, but then asks about the implied next part. We'll also do that, and it's a little more compact in time and thought. Um, and you want to continue that conversation. You don't want it to fall apart. So you want them to be comfortable in the moment so that they can just let the flow of information come out without having to think about the format you guys are talking in at that moment. So what's the best way to do that? I would argue there really isn't one best way. Again, humans are humans. There's 1,000 best ways. There's 1,000,000 best ways. And your goal is to find out what is your best way. Um, but again, there's key points that everybody should try to incorporate, build rapport. Like I said, I like to take notes and make diagrams mostly to cement it in my head, but it also helps, particularly with the diagrams, if I have something wrong, a researcher can look at that image immediately and go, no, no, that we don't do that. I forgot we do this, or I'll have it wrong and they'll correct me. That's kind of great. The summary write-up, which I mentioned, again, not everybody does this. I find very useful because it'll reveal gaps in my thinking. Oh, what the hell happened between A and B? There's a whole pile of magic that I missed. And so that's also very useful. And calendaring, it's very easy for all of us to get overwhelmed with all the other things, death by 1,000 cuts. So having something tangible to kind of poke you to make sure you're doing your job, or at least following up on this, is, I think, super valuable and certainly cheap and easy to do. All right, so that's you know, my hurried rush view for how to become expert at all things all at once for all people. I am curious, are there questions, comments, wisdom that folks would like to share?
Yeah, I apologize, but we're already a good bit behind our time, so I'm
Nope.
gonna.
Okay.
I think we're gonna have to. Can you stop saying perfect? Thank you. I'm gonna give quick instructions for two categories. If you are a researcher, you don't have to do anything special. You're just going to be asked questions. Just answer the questions you're asked, and everything will go wonderfully. And thank you for being here. We really appreciate you. Without you being here, we could not do this at all. Judges, you pretty much have two things to do. One is you don't intervene unless you notice one of the facilitators dominating the time, and you want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to ask questions, make suggestions, and so on. In which case, you can ask the person who's dominating the time to please step back and let others have a chance. That's the only intervention you need to do. Other than that, your job is you write down the names of the facilitators in the breakout room that you're with. And then at the end of that session, you give each of them a yes or a no. And then whether they get a badge depends on whether the majority of their responses are yes. And if there's a tie because they got judged by four judges or six, then the ties will get a badge. So if at least 50% of their votes are yes, they get the badge. Yes or no, no maybe. You're welcome to include comments and notes, but what we need from you is yes or no for each of the people. And please write their full name because we might have multiple people with the same first name or even the same last name. Okay, so facilitators, your job is very straightforward. Find out what their research is, or more accurately, the computing intensive and or data intensive aspects of their research. Find out what barriers they're either currently hitting or anticipate hitting, and then offer them some suggestions. This is a very time telescoped approach. You will have 15 minutes for each of these. There will be three such sessions with a brief break in between while we rotate the judges and the researchers. You will stay put in your breakout room as a facilitator, and a new researcher and a new set of judges will come into your room. Okay, so I've got everybody set up in the rooms. At least I think I do. Let me double check that. We had a couple of drops, but I think we can make this work. Give me just a second. Uh, Hang on. Okay, that's fine. And I want to give one more. Okay, I can't. All right. Okay, so I think we're about as good as we're likely to get at this point. One, two. I guess I can give one more. Hang on. Uh, Oops. Give me a second, and then we'll start. Four. Okay. Okay, here we go. And as soon as you're in the room, go there. Hey, folks who are still in the main room, please go to your assigned breakout room. Peter, please go to your assigned breakout room. Edmund, please go to your assigned breakout room. Dinesh, please go to your assigned breakout room. Farshad, please go to your assigned breakout room. Mariko, please go to your assigned breakout room. JP, please go to your assigned breakout room. Kennethan, please go to your assigned breakout room. James, please go to your assigned breakout room. William, please go to your assigned breakout room. Albert, please go to your assigned breakout room. Rajesh, please go to your assigned breakout room. Tinghua, please go to your assigned breakout room. Ismail, please go to your assigned breakout room. Shao, please go to your assigned breakout room. Cheyenne, please go to your assigned breakout room. Jinlei, please go to your assigned breakout room. Abraham, please go to your assigned breakout room. I see a few of you have not been assigned to a room yet, and I will go ahead and put you in a room. So hang on. Uh, So two, one, to room two, go to room three. Okay, folks, please go to your assigned breakout rooms. Dinesh, please go to your assigned breakout room. JP, please go to your assigned breakout room. Kinnathan, please go to your assigned breakout room. Albert, please go to your assigned breakout room. Rajesh, please go to your assigned breakout room. Ismail, please go to your assigned breakout room. Cheyenne, please go to your assigned breakout room.
Yeah,
Does that
yeah,
answer your question?
yeah. Yes, thank you for that suggestion.
And then we can.
Data because you said it was very large.
Yeah, my current solution is like store it locally because
with each other and the next level would be like atomistic simulation. I mean, for if you are trying to calculate like this electronic simulation.
Um, so it may be it may be that I mean maybe not here today at this very first meeting, but it may be that we would want to have a
because that takes up so much space. It takes up like half of my home area. Then I don't have much to, hold these test sets, which have to be, um, which, yeah, which have to be initially stored on my home area.
Henry, I just got a notification that the recording's on again.
Let me kill that then. Sorry.